As the world grows more challenging and uncertain, America's economic security is often inseparable from national security. Today's guest, Indiana's Senator Todd Young, is a former Marine captain and now a key member of the Senate Finance, Commerce, and Intelligence Committees. Young's mission? To protect the nation in a wide-open, AI-enabled world. From Ballard Studios in Washington, D.C., it's 13th and Park.
The hard things that are necessary, we either do it or we'll pay the price down the road.
That often is missing in politics.
We have to solve everything.
It's a nightmare.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
I have faith in the American people.
Those are the facts.
The Illuminati, right there. Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
What's in this tea?
Senator, great to have you on 13th and Park. These are very interesting times we live in, right?
Adam, I'm really excited to be with you. There is a lot of chaos in the world. There is a lot of hope and strong beliefs here at home, and people are looking to their government to perform.
One of the things that everyone's been focusing on for a while, as you know, and you have too, has been America's southern border. So there was a report that just came out talking about MQ-9 drones allegedly going across the Mexican line to take a good look at the drug cartels that are at the heart of a lot of the problems we're experiencing with things that are coming over the border. As a Marine captain who spent time on the southern border in the drone patrol, we'll call it, this is something you're very familiar with. Do you think this is one of the things that the American people can expect in our effort to finally start fighting back against something that seems to have been, unresolved for far too long?
I do think they can expect President Trump to use the many tools at his disposal. I think they can expect broad congressional support for utilization of those tools to secure traffic across the southern border. If there was one issue that really resonated with Americans, especially sort of working class Americans, which is, I think, most of America, it was this. We need to control our borders for humanitarian reasons, economic reasons, and reasons of national security. And there are certain tools that have not been, in my estimation, used enough. And among those are some of our military resources, as long as they're used consistent with our existing laws on the books. And in this case, my reading is these drones were used in that way. The other thing I didn't mention about the border is so much of the fentanyl traffic is coming across that southern border. And that's a dimension of this that in the midst of the global pandemic and following it, I think there's been less public conversation about. But in my state and so many others, populations are being decimated by these drugs. And here again, we need to pull out every stop to try and address these challenges.
So, Senator, you see this also in your home state of Indiana, right, which you've referred to in the past as a new border state, right, because of things like this.
That's right. In fact, I leaned into this issue in my last election campaign and haven't stopped talking about it, but I was running television ads. My first ad was about border security at a time when, frankly, not a lot of Americans, very few legislators, even on the Republican side, were talking about border security. Since that time, it's become the top issue for so many Americans.
When you look at the border situation, it almost feels in a way like whack-a-mole. Like, what do you go for first? You've got the scourge of fentanyl, which is literally killing people across this nation. You've got sex trafficking, which is one of the most abhorrent crimes against humanity. You've got what you've referred to in the past about the sleeper cells that still are probably somewhere in pockets around America, which we don't want to think about, but takes you back to a very, very dark day in our nation's history in 9/11. What do we need to neutralize first? I know we have to go after all these things.
I'm so glad you asked that because you sort of campaign in flourishes, right?
Yeah.
And then once you assume office, it's time to govern. And that means making trade-offs, establishing priorities. And the examples you just offered, I would put it in the first tier of national security and major felony crimes. Anyone who's worked with the FBI or followed closely some of these cases in the news media, you know that identifying a handful of criminal elements for a given case, it can be really expensive and resource intensive. But here we're dealing with a much larger population. So let's start there and keep the American people safe and secure. And then let's get an estimate from the administration about what we're talking about. I think most Americans would be more sympathetic for young children who came here years ago. They've been in our schools. Maybe they've graduated and landed good jobs. So in our rhetoric, we have not really discriminated between those critical categories we were just discussing and the population I just mentioned. Now it's time to discuss that.
Do we need partners in this effort? And when I talk about partners, it's like other nations to help be a part of this fight, as opposed to America doing it alone. Because you could very persuasively argue, Senator, it's just bigger than all of us, right? In this country, we need help, but it also will help our partners who would come to the fore in terms of making things better, safer, and also bring our nations even closer together.
This is a whole of society, whole of government effort in the United States, and it really needs to be certainly in neighboring countries, but also in countries that are further afield, because many of those countries are originating sources of our illegal population. So it's going to require a lot of cooperation, which here again means we're going to have to establish priorities, not just within the realm of illegal immigration, but even on other issues, we're going to have to consider, if we really want to tackle this issue, as I do, which issues we prioritize to draw the line on for other countries. If we alienate other countries, we've got a lot of leverage. The United States does.
Yeah.
Because of the size of our economy, because of the size of our military, because of our many alliances and partnerships, then we may expend capital, a lot of capital, on things that are secondary or tertiary concerns. And border security, I know from my constituents, that's concern number 1 or 2 for most of them.
It's amazing when you say that from Indiana. You're talking about border security. And of course, they're both borders. There's a northern and southern border, but principally it's a southern border. And yet you relate to this as if you were the state of Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, literally on that border, right?
My constituents, they're welcoming people. They're also smart people. Most of them know that their jobs probably haven't been directly disrupted. They understand that these hardworking, most of them illegals, come here to land jobs that others won't take. They get that. But it offends them deeply that they have a government that chews up resources but doesn't do the most fundamental things of safety and security and enforcing our own borders. And if we can't get that right, they think, and they're right, what else is not being tended to?
There you go.
We have not just an optical, but a reputational responsibility to uphold here so that we can continue to bring people along when we ask them to do something a little harder.
I couldn't agree with you more. We've said we're going to do many things over the many years. And in recent times, it seems like our talk was cheap because we weren't following through. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is one where you have to show it.
Otherwise, people stop trusting the institution. They stop trusting you to work through the institution to solve problems. And frankly, that's when these moments happen, when people start to lose trust in government. And let's fix this.
Okay, so I'm going to take you from the southern border to the open seas, right? The open seas.
Yeah, sure.
So you and Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, in a very bipartisan way, have put together the SHIPS Act. And it blows my mind how far behind the United States is in a critical aspect of commerce and national security, right? So as you know better than anybody, China is way ahead. You have China, Japan, Korea on that list of shipbuilders. It seems like America is down there with Iran. Why is it that we have let it get to where it is today? And what can we realistically do, Senator, to really put a spark into something that has everything to do with our economic security and, as you pointed out, the nation's security as well?
You know, what can we do? We need to pass this SHIPS Act that I've worked with Senator Kelly. But we got into this, in short, because we took our eye off the ball about the importance of shipbuilding in a maritime nation. And we have lost the capability to build not just U.S. Navy ships, but we've lost the capacity also to build merchant ships. Most of our trade, for the benefit of the listening audience, travels by sea, not by air, which costs a lot more. Certainly not by truck. We have become a wealthy nation because we are a maritime nation. That's a big part of it. If China says, nope, we're not going to carry any of your cargo on merchant vessels, that impairs very directly our ability to move materiel and personnel in a time of war to where they need to go. But on a daily basis, it could lead to economic coercion by our enemies, saying, effectively, if you adopt this policy, we're going to make it hurt. We also find that the workforce required to build a merchant ship and the skills that that workforce develops and retains is roughly the same skill required to build U.S. Navy ships. You get scale and it drives down the cost of these various platforms in different ways. And then, we need merchant mariners. I focused less on that. It's interesting and aesthetically pleasing. And I actually am excited about having President Trump do a press event in front of ships. But training these workers is also really exciting, giving them great careers, building things again across the industrial Midwest and other areas. I think, in my home state of Indiana, you can imagine at least making components for these vessels. So there's going to be a lot of work involved in it, consistent with the president's platform of trying to bring good-paying manufacturing jobs back to middle America.
And we can make things people can see. I mean, I don't make light of that point. You've done yeoman's work on the CHIPS Act, which is now in play, to try to bring some control of the semiconductor industry and other related things back into domestic hands, as opposed to, once again, having to be concerned about whether or not we're having a good day or not with China. So how is that going? And why is that so fundamentally important in the larger question that you address all the time, which is we have an innovation-based economy. We have all these new things coming in, which seemingly are going to determine power, leadership, whatever you want to call it, in the future. Are we doing well enough on those fronts, Senator, to feel confident that we can be a world leader in that as opposed to a follower? And this is one place I don't think we want to be a follower.
We're in an ongoing global power competition with China. In many crucial areas, Beijing is gaining ground or even ahead of the United States. The world's autocrats are attempting to exert their influence across the globe. You see, this is about deciding which values are going to animate these technologies in the future. It's, I think, defied all expectations, including those among supporters, for unlocking private capital. The objective of the CHIPS Act was to take risk out of our supply chains, risk out of the system, so that we could reliably source, not with 100% reliability, but reliably source the necessary components to build semiconductors, chips. We've done that. Within just a few years, we will have a 20% independency from other nations. That may not sound like much, like, gosh, doesn't that mean we still source about 80% of this stuff? Yes, that is what it means. But A, it takes a long time to build these fabs. B, we actually don't want to make everything here. That would be the surest route to having a very, very expensive semiconductor, and the modern economy can only run with access to these semiconductors. So that would tank our economy. So brass tacks, my dad, business person, he used to say, if you're not tracking numbers, you're not really keeping score. So in this case, we've unlocked about $30 billion of taxpayer money, right? We work hard for it. So what are you getting for $30 billion? That's real money. We have unlocked roughly $450 billion of private commitments, and those are for key elements of the supply chain that we have identified to locate here.
So I go back into your campaigns and the expression, if you want to fix Washington, send in a Marine. I love that, by the way. I love
thank
that.
you. If it seems like Washington's rigged for the well-connected, that's because it is. Career politicians and lobbyists won't fix it. It's time to send in the Marines. I'm impressed that you went back and found that.
As a political media person who's done a lot of that in my career, I couldn't help myself. I loved it, right? I mean, I got up out of my chair and said, yeah, send them in. So obviously, the U.S. Naval Academy, I thank you, by the way, for your service. But I have a bone to pick with you. It has to do with soccer. So you played soccer at the Naval Academy, Division I club. What position did you play, by the way, Senator?
When I wasn't on the bench,
Right.
I was mostly, I played defense in high school. I go back to high school because I was probably better in high school. I played forward. And then when I was really young, I played sweeper. They don't even really have that position much anymore.
That was critical. So this predates you because I'm significantly later in life than you are. But I was on a Division III soccer club, Haverford College, outside of Philadelphia. And we came to play Navy when I was a sophomore. And I was on the bench too, but I was like the first guy off the bench. I was like the spark plug they put in there and wind up and let me go. And it was a great experience. As you know, the Naval Academy, with visiting sports teams, they bring you in, they feed you beautifully, they take care of you, they love you until game time. And then they turn a switch and they're coming after you. As it turns out, in this particular year, we just got fortunate. We beat Navy. We're a Division III club. Preseason, we beat them. It was 3-1. And I remember one moment in the game where I had the ball alone at midfield going to the goal. And I could feel the heat of 3 center backs coming after me to take me out. I think I shot from 30 yards out just to get away from harm, right? But after that happened, Senator, Navy took Haverford College off their schedule for 20 years. So I want you to know it had nothing to do with you, but
the Naval Academy won a national championship back, it was like the 60s. But you can say you beat a national championship club 3-1. That's kind of a big deal.
Well, I can tell you when we played them,
yeah,
they weren't quite that. Right. They had better days.
You don't need to say that. Maybe someday we'll have to go back onto the field and kick the ball around, I guess. But it's a great sport, though. It really is. It's a great sport. And we've got the World Cup coming back to the United States and to Canada and Mexico, as I know you've been following. And when I started this exercise, traveling around the States and campaigning for the U.S. House in 2010, I didn't talk a lot about my soccer background, right? And then the word got out. It was regarded as more of a blue state sport at the time than a red state sport. But just recently, the last 10 or 15 years, that's changed. I mean, this has become a very viable mainstream sport with a decent television audience, with the MLS. Our national team now has a new coach, and I've got very high hopes for that team. And there's a lot of soccer excitement. So that earlier generation, you paved the way, even though you must have caught the Naval Academy on a bad day.
We absolutely did, right.
But it's really changed since our time. And I don't think I followed. You're very generous, but I don't think I followed you by that many years.
2 last questions. One is it true, or is it an exaggeration, that you maybe hold the record among public officials in Indiana going back to very early days of having eaten at more Taco Bells than any other elected official in the history of Indiana? And if so, everyone wants to know the answer to one question.
Yes.
In terms of the sauce you use, do you like it mild, medium, or hot?
Oh, fantastic. Great question. There is incontrovertible social media evidence that can be validated by numerous, not one, but numerous campaign and official staff that I hold the record in terms of Taco Bell visits and consumption per visit. But I am very proud in this era of fiscal responsibility to underscore that I still order off the value menu. I'm a traditionalist. That leads to more modest pricing choices. I get lots of bean burritos, soft tacos, and it's always Diablo sauce. And I'll tell you, I put lots of that hot sauce on there too. I'm the guy who grabs a big handful, and the people behind me think I'm being rude and crass because there's no way conceivable that I could put all of that on my meal, and I actually do. So long-winded answer to a very important question. These are the high-end cultivated tastes that
no question.
The senator, the man of the people, I guess, right? That I eat.
Well, Senator, you have obviously a very big love for this country where you're working with members on both sides of the aisle to get big stuff done. We encourage you to keep doing it. We encourage you to keep asking those questions.
Adam, thank you for a very professional show. We mix some fun into this too. I just wish you the very best with this podcast and everything else you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it, Senator. Godspeed.
Godspeed.